Hello and welcome to the State Secrets Podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kelly. If you're afraid of a future dominated by artificial intelligence, this episode might not be the one for you. We're going deep on the Chinese platform called DeepSeek, an AI model or series of models, which we'll learn, that claim to rival ChatGPT for a fraction of the cost. But first, ripped from the headlines of the Cipher Brief's open source report this week, China also announced a new AI agent called Manus. What is an AI agent? I'm so glad you asked. Ken Hughes is the Cipher Brief's senior editor for cyber and tech. Ken, what can you tell us about Manus?
Well, Manus seems to have exploded since Friday and over the weekend and has gotten a lot of tech media coverage, primarily because it's Chinese, and so it follows on the heels of the DeepSeek release. But it's different than DeepSeek. It's described as the world's first autonomous AI agent, which means that when it's given a task or given an objective, it self-initiates. It goes out and conducts research online and through its platform. And then it generates a complete response. And according to some of the media reports, they give the example of, let's say you have a collection of candidate resumes for a job. Well, Manus will go through the collected data. It will read each resume. It will rank order them, and then it will produce a recommended hire from all of the information that's been examined. It does this without any prompts or interventions by humans in that whole A to Z process. So
Wow.
that's what that I think explains some of the initial excitement over this.
Excitement and concern, right? Some people are a little bit nervous about having some AI that is self-generated.
Yes, for sure. Well, two things I would say. There are very much concerns that without close human monitoring, that the thing can go awry. It can produce erroneous results, or it can sort of go off on its own and create something that was not intended. That's one concern. The other concern is that some of the reviewers of this early test case are pointing to some malfunctions, I guess, with the Manus model, saying that sometimes it's not entirely factual, and that it sometimes takes much longer than existing chatbots to produce results, which is the exact opposite of the hype that is initially surrounding this.
Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, it's a sign, I'm sure, of things to come. Ken Hughes is senior editor for cyber and tech at the Cipher Brief. We love following your reporting in the open source report each morning at thecipherbrief.com too. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
In this week's State Secrets podcast, we're talking with Cipher Brief expert Chip Usher, who also serves as senior director with Eric Schmidt's Special Competitive Studies Project, to unpack the real potential and risk of DeepSeek. First, this quick message from our sponsor of this week's State Secrets episode, Flashpoint.
This episode of the State Secrets podcast is brought to you by Flashpoint. 2025 is shaping up to be a pivotal year for security leaders. It's not just cyber threats anymore. Physical risks and geopolitical tensions are colliding, creating a web of challenges no one can afford to ignore. That's where Flashpoint comes in. As the largest private provider of threat intelligence, Flashpoint delivers what security teams need most: clarity. By combining cutting-edge technology with the expertise of world-class analyst teams, their Ignite platform gives organizations instant access to critical data, expertly analyzed insights, and real-time alerts, all in one seamless platform. From Fortune 500 companies to government agencies, Flashpoint is the name trusted to keep people, assets, and operations secure. To access the industry's best threat data and intelligence, visit flashpoint.io today. That's flashpoint.io.
It's my pleasure to welcome Chip Usher into the Cipher Brief's virtual studio. Chip is a senior director with the Special Competitive Studies Project. And if you're not already tracking the important work they do, I hope that you will check it out. It's pretty incredible. Chip is also a former senior intelligence officer with the CIA. So it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here, Chip.
Suzanne, it's a great pleasure of mine to be with you again. Cipher Brief is a must-read for me and my colleagues, and just really glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that. So I really, you were one of the first people that I thought of when I heard this news and saw the headlines about DeepSeek. Really, because I think for so many of us, Chip, it's difficult to understand the significance of these headlines. And I might just be speaking for myself, but it's hard. So could you just kind of help us unpack it a little bit? How do you see this as a threat and what it means sort of on a broader scale?
Happy to. And it is confusing because there are claims and counterclaims as to what DeepSeek actually did and its significance. So let me see if I can kind of walk through it in layman's terms so that we can all kind of talk about it in a similar way. What occurred, really going back to around Christmas time, is this Chinese AI lab called DeepSeek revealed and published papers about 3 models that it had created. The first was called V3, and the most recent one is called R1. And the significance is that in the case of R1, which is the latest one that they released earlier this month, its performance is comparable to OpenAI's most recent model, O1. These version names often sound similar, and they kind of come fast and furious because they keep releasing new versions of them. But the DeepSeek model is comparable in performance to OpenAI's, and it exceeds the performance of Llama, which is another U.S. company, Meta's AI model. And that, in and of itself, is significant. But on top of that, it's how they went about it. The way that they created their model was faster and cheaper and used less compute than what American companies have done. And that is what has the markets riled up. It's what has policymakers in Washington and around the world looking at this very seriously, because as we have read over the last year or plus, as we've been watching OpenAI and Meta and Anthropic release their models and creating more and more of these data centers to build and train their models with. We're hearing figures of hundreds of billions of dollars, right? These frontier models are consuming vast amounts of electricity, and they consume vast numbers of NVIDIA's most advanced GPU chips. And in the case of DeepSeek, what they managed to accomplish with V3, which they announced around Christmas time, is they trained it in just 2 months. And they trained it on GPUs that are known as H800s. These are NVIDIA chips that were exported legally to China in the wake of the October 2022 export ban announced by the Biden administration. That ban really targeted what are the most advanced chips that NVIDIA makes, the H100s, but it didn't preclude the sale of H800s. And so it's very interesting that this Chinese company was able to squeeze an enormous amount of performance out of inferior chips and fewer of them. To give you a comparison, the published reports I've seen indicate that they used about 50,000 H800 chips. The more recent OpenAI efforts, they're talking about 500,000 H100 chips, right? So a vast difference in compute power.
Wow.
So they were able to do this in significantly less time because they put together some techniques that AI labs have been developing and are using, but in some novel and unique ways. And so how they do it was sort of interesting. The first thing that they did is they used a technique called mixture of experts, MOE. Now, what does that mean? Let me see if I can explain it in terms that a layman can understand.
Yeah.
Think about a company like General Electric. General Electric makes all sorts of things: dishwashers, aircraft engines, radars, right? So if you're an outsider going to GE and you knock on the door and the receptionist greets you, imagine if every time there was a query, whether it's I need to buy a jet engine or I need to sell you paper clips, that decision went through the entire GE infrastructure before an answer was delivered. That's sort of roughly analogous way as to how OpenAI and some of our closed model systems operate, kind of brute computing power. This other technique, which is not unknown to American companies, but what DeepSeek really seems to have perfected here, is called mixture of experts. So when you walk into that reception room at GE and you say, I want to buy a jet engine, it immediately directs you to that expert, the expert that's going to deliver you the jet engine that you require. And again, our companies have been developing techniques to do this, but it seems that DeepSeek kind of really refined that process. It speeds up the response and it reduces the amount of compute and energy that's required to deliver an answer. Yeah. That's one method that they used. The other is it's called reinforcement learning. And again, your typical AI model that we are kind of used to playing with, the ChatGPT and o1 and Sonnet 3.5. They are trained using reinforcement learning, but it's sort of akin to how you would train your pet dog, right? Mm-hmm. You ask it to do a trick. When it performs that trick, you give it a reward. Mm-hmm. And that early approach of kind of blunt reinforcement learning was very effective, and in fact was the underpinnings of what DeepMind accomplished when it beat the best Go player several years back, right? AlphaGo was a reinforcement learning approach. In the time since AlphaGo, there are new techniques where not just providing a reward and eventually your pet dog is going to learn how to do the trick, but offer rewards, but then offer which experts might be useful to iterate to get the better response. And it's proven to be a little bit more of an efficient and faster way to generate learning and training for an AI model. So that's another approach that they used. And it would appear there have been accusations by OpenAI, backed up by Microsoft, in the days since DeepSeek made its announcement, that they may have, in fact, used OpenAI o1 to train their model. It's a process called distillation. And in fact, our companies use it all the time when they release a model, but then they release a kind of smaller follow-on model that's cheaper, but it's consumer-facing. They often train that model from their bigger, larger model. And it appears that DeepSeek may have done that in this instance, which got their model kind of up to speed quicker. So in a way, they're kind of free riding on the work that OpenAI and others may have pioneered. So this is not to denigrate the accomplishment, but it does suggest that the amount of compute that DeepSeek and other Chinese companies will have available to them in the future will still matter. They did this with H100s. Imagine what they could have accomplished if they had H100s.
Any company that comes along and can produce something at a certain level of quality faster and cheaper is a wake-up call in the market. And the market certainly felt that initially, and they've rebounded a little bit since that initial shock. But when it comes to the other things that are being learned about DeepSeek and learned from DeepSeek, one thing that I'm really focused on is the innovation, like the level of innovation that would have been required for them to do something like this. And you don't traditionally think of the PRC. I, as a layman, think of them as being extremely competent, but not necessarily as innovative as something like this. That was a bit of a wake-up call for me. Should that also be a wake-up call for national security professionals here?
Absolutely. And that, in fact, is sort of the main thesis of my organization, the Special Competitive Studies Project, that we have entered a period of intensified innovation competition, primarily between the United States and the People's Republic of China, but not those two actors alone. But this is emblematic of the sort of thing that we're going to face more and more frequently in the years ahead. And it's not the first time. I mean, we don't have to go that far back to other recent examples of Chinese breakthroughs that sort of shocked the marketplace and shocked the national security community. Think back to 2023 when Huawei released their Mate 60 Pro smartphone, just timed perfectly when our Commerce Secretary was paying a visit to Beijing. And the performance of that smartphone was remarkably good, though it has since proven not to be as good as our best smartphones. But it certainly was a strong showing, and it shocked people. And DeepSeek is similar. I think the upshot is it shows how quickly China can close the gap if a gap exists. And that ought to be concerning to the United States, not just for commercial and competitive reasons, but also for national security reasons.
Mm-hmm. So what does this mean, do you think, Chip, to the intelligence community in particular?
Well, here at SCSP, we have been sounding the alarm that we as an intelligence community need to devote more time and attention and resources to what we have coined techno-economic intelligence. Nothing especially new to the IC. It's been done for years, but it needs more attention and more resources so that policymakers down the line are not caught by surprise by events like this. Now, I'm not privy to the current intelligence reporting, but judging by what we've seen in the open source with regard to the market's reaction, policymakers' reaction, I would hazard a guess that our intelligence community did not identify DeepSeek as on the threshold of a major AI breakthrough. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where we would like to see the IC land here in the not too distant is to do exactly that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it needs to shift how it collects against techno-economic issues like this, who it collects against, and how it goes about analyzing and assessing that data.
Mm-hmm. That's a tall order. It's easy to criticize, but once you understand the challenges that are associated with getting that kind of information, I think you have a whole lot more respect for the intelligence community. Anything else you want to leave us with as we kind of consider what this means in this particular case, but also the competition between China and the U.S. moving forward when it comes to technology and innovation like we talked about?
Yeah, just one other point. And DeepSeek, their model is what they call an open source model, which is different from OSINT. This is meaning that their code is openly available and available for others to unpack and understand, unlike OpenAI and Anthropic and some of ours, which are closed source. But this is a real boon to hostile cyber and disinformation actors around the globe. China, Iran, North Korea, these actors are now going to have available to them at very little cost, with very little effort, access to a very capable AI. And they can iterate on that to develop specialized models to conduct cyber and disinformation ops at scale. And it's already happening. I saw a recent report that there are literally dozens of cyber actors inside China that already have been using Google's Gemini AI to write malicious code and to search for network vulnerabilities in foreign countries. Well, now with DeepSeek's model, this capability is going to be diffused even further faster. Mm-hmm. So that's one implication, is we need to be sort of guard up against AI-enabled cyber and disinformation ops even more than before. And the last point I would make is the accusation that DeepSeek may have learned, benefited from U.S. developed models, kind of brings up the point that we need to be able to defend national security AIs when we create them. We cannot have Chinese users logging on and cheating ahead to train their models based on national security U.S. models. Mm-hmm. It absolutely raises the importance of defending our systems.
Yeah, another incredibly significant challenge. Chip Usher, Senior Director with the Special Competitive Studies Project. Once again, we don't really do commercials here, but I have to tell you, I have not found a resource yet that breaks down a lot of what we're seeing in the development of technology and the race and its impact on national security than at SCSP. So thank you so much for joining us here for the Explainer today. It's a pleasure having you here at the Cipher Brief, Chip.
Good to be with you, Suzanne. Take care.
You've been listening to the State Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kelly. I hope you will also check us out online at thecipherbrief.com for more expert perspectives on what's happening every day in the news. We'll see you next time. Take care.